It's called the Replicator program. The US war machine will be churning out thousands of AI-powered drones, built cheap and quick. But will they be enough to stop China? Welcome to America Uncovered, I'm Chris Chappell. The US has a problem. War with China is getting more and more likely, and China has tons of advantages. Not only does it have the home turf, but it simply has more of everything, more ships, more missiles, and more people. On top of that, China can simply build more stuff at a fraction of the cost. The US realizes it needs to up its game. That's why it's changing things up with the announcement of the new Replicator initiative. No, not these replicators, I hope. The Replicator program I'm talking about is the Department of Defense's big play to build thousands of autonomous weapons in just 2 years, specifically against China. This was first announced by Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks.
Today we're making another big bet, the latest piece of our comprehensive warfighting-centric approach to innovation. It's called the Replicator Initiative. Replicator is meant to help us overcome the PRC's biggest advantage, which is mass. More ships, more missiles, more people. We'll counter the PLA's mass with mass of our own, but ours will be harder to plan for, harder to hit, harder to beat. With smart people, smart concepts, and smart technology, our military will be more nimble, with uplift and urgency from the commercial sector.
Under the Defense Innovation Unit, the Replicator program will specifically focus on what's called All-Domain Attritable Autonomy, or ADA2 systems. What defines ADA2 systems is that they're small, smart, cheap, and many. These will be autonomous, meaning they can operate without real-time human command. There's a lot of emphasis on responsible and ethical AI. These drones will also be attritable, which in this context means drones will be cheap enough for the US military to be okay with losing them on missions. This is different from other US drones like the Valkyrie. That's also unmanned, designed to fly alongside manned fighter jets, but Valkyries are too expensive to be expendable. With replicators, think of the Switchblade drones the US gave to Ukraine to fight off the much larger Russian military. Now imagine a whole lot more of these drones coupled with AI at a fraction of the cost. They're not going to replace the US's bigger, more expensive weapons programs, but they'll help give the military what they need within a short time frame and quickly adapt. That's because these will also be short-term focused, as opposed to being made to last for decades. According to Hicks, ADA2 systems are things we might use for 3 to 5 years before we move on to the next thing, as we must, given a dynamic, fast-moving adversary and the pace of innovation. Now, the idea of drone swarms isn't exactly a new concept. The US military has already been looking into this type of technology for a long time, but the Replicator initiative is more than just swarming drones. What's new is how they're being produced. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. The US military has a notorious reputation for taking way too long and spending way too much money on making the latest and greatest military hardware. But there are hopes this could change with the Replicator initiative. Hicks says the program is a game-changing shift in defense and security. And the Asia Times says it could redefine modern war. It all has to do with how the US plans to develop thousands of small and cheap drones for 3 to 5 year use, all produced within just 2 years. That's very different from how the US military operates today, which is all about developing long-lasting, big, expensive weapon systems that don't see the light of day until more than a decade after prototyping. The Replicator initiative is less about creating any particular new system and more about shifting the mindset of the entire Department of Defense. According to Hicks, Replicator is not a new program of record. We're not creating a new bureaucracy, and we will not be asking for new money in fiscal year 2024. Not all problems need new money. If the Pentagon isn't asking for new money for the replicators, then how are they planning on running it? Are we going to rely on self-replicating machine life? I hope not. Hicks explains that Replicator will use existing funding, existing programming lines, and existing authorities to accelerate production and delivery at scale. It's a reorganization of existing funds expected to cost in the hundreds of millions rather than billions. Replicator intends to leverage teamwork between the Defense Department and the private sector, including commercial, non-traditional, and traditional defense companies alike, as well as collaboration and integration with partners. There's still a lot of details that aren't made public yet, but what we do know is that this could be a big opportunity for civilian drone makers. The question is, can the Replicator initiative do what it claims? There are already several challenges. For one, the pool for potential civilian partners is very small because obviously these drones need to be made in the US. There are companies like Skydio and Red Cat Holdings which are already working with the U.S. military to provide small portable drones. But they're the exceptions. There aren't many others since the vast majority of commercial drone makers are in China. There's also the question of whether the Replicator initiative can actually deliver drones within 2 years. The program's not the first to claim to speed up production. Many had high hopes that digital engineering would speed things up since it would allow for rapid prototyping through 3D virtual models and realistic simulations. Some hoped that digital engineering would help produce new Air Force planes every 5 years. But the poster child for digital engineering, like the Boeing T-7A Red Hawk, exposed digital engineering's pitfalls. Lots of setbacks are delaying its debut until almost 11 years after its first flight in 2016. Who knows if the Replicator initiative will face delays and higher costs? Chances are that'll happen, since that's what normally happens with just about every military program. I'd genuinely be surprised if the U.S. military was really right on schedule and within budget. Even if the Replicator initiative manages to churn out tons of cheap and affordable drones, manufacturers will have to take into consideration that war over Taiwan will be geographically different from Ukraine. While Taiwanese forces would be able to make use of small quadcopters and maritime drones in territorial defense scenario, the closest the United States will likely be operating from is 100 to 200 plus nautical miles away. It's one thing for large, expensive drones to operate at that kind of distance, but it's a big challenge for small, cheap ones. On top of that, producing thousands of drones for military use would probably require new production facilities. So the U.S. government might have to make some big investments in infrastructure. And some, like Brian Clark at the Hudson Institute, warn that the Replicator initiative needs to avoid replicating past mistakes by overestimating AI's capabilities. After all, other attempts to have fully automated systems like the U.S. Navy's Large Unmanned Surface Vessels program and the U.S. Army's Bradley Fighting Vehicle program have had to adjust their benchmarks because of AI's limitations. Perhaps Clark is also concerned about AI growing sentient and hungry for galactic domination. Let's just hope that China doesn't copy from them. But while it takes years for the Defense Department to finance its war machines, viewers like you can help fund America Uncovered in just 2 minutes over on patreon.com/America Uncovered. Think you can make a good drone operator? Then let me see you land that mouse pointer on the link in the description below, or click that orange button. And if you want to learn more in depth about how the U.S. is fast-tracking 6th-generation fighter jets to fight against China and Russia, then click on the video here. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.